We'll take questions now, but I have a question. How are these clinics, why are they permitted to practice medicine without a license? I mean, hospitals have the Joint Commission that comes in and evaluates their level of care. Doctor, can you answer why legally these clinics are able to do what they do?
They do what they do. They do what they do largely because people like us don't raise our voices. You know, anybody can get any clinic put together if you have enough money, you have a good lawyer, and you know how the lingo goes with this thing we call a certificate of need. So what they do is they come together for some other purpose. They want to put together a multi-specialty clinic. They decide they're going to move along these ways. Planned Parenthood puts a ton of money behind them. They go down the bowling brook to where they meet to give out these approvals. They tell a story. The guys say okay. They put a rubber stamp on it, and then it opens. And they don't have the same oversight. If you want to open up a place to do surgery, you have to do far more than you do to open up an abortion clinic. For any of the clinics that I did, you don't even need that. You just need to have the money to put 4 walls up, make sure the zoning was okay, and open your doors. And my suspicion is that most of these clinics that do abortions are the same thing.
What's the agency that issues those?
It's the, I think it's called the Health Clinic. I don't know the full name of it. I was very involved with it in January, but it's the certificate of need. That's what they do. And if you Google that, you'll find exactly what it is to do.
Doctor, I came in a little late, but are there any references to the fake fertility method in those situations here, or
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, can you come up here, please? We're having a hard time hearing you. I'm sorry.
I'll just talk a little louder from here. Doctor, do people talk about the fake fertility?
Oh, okay. Here's the question. I get this question at every place I go like this. I get asked if people to talk about the Creighton method for infertility. I did not talk about the Creighton method for infertility tonight. I think that the Creighton method is an excellent form of natural family planning. I think it's an excellent way of treating people who are trying to get pregnant within a model that works around fertility awareness. But the Creighton method is, for those who don't know, it's based on a place called the Pope Paul VI Center, which is in Omaha, Nebraska, run by a gentleman by the name of Thomas Hildreth. And for about 20 years, it has provided an update of a birth control method known as the Billings method to try to help people get pregnant. They've trained a number of people who are both in the medical field and the general public on how to teach this form of natural family planning. It's a good natural family planning method for people, and it utilizes what I say, because I spoke to one of the 11 people who were fully trained in this last Saturday. We had a very nice, productive talk that brings the worlds together of the natural family planning people and the world in which I lived for 15 years, because it checks a lot of hormone levels, does a lot of different things along that way. It's a decent level, but for my cup of tea, it's only one of a number of different methods that can work for couples who are looking to utilize fertility awareness methods to become pregnant. And I do support it very much, but it's only one of many.
Why isn't abortion considered surgical? I had an abortion. I was anesthetized, and so I don't consciously remember it. However, the sound of those hand dryers in public bathrooms used to send me through the roof. And come to find out from therapy that that's probably what it was based on, the suction sound. But getting back to my original question, why was it not, why is it not considered surgical, and why isn't there more post-procedural follow-up done? What laws can?
Well, I mean, again, I have never opened an abortion clinic, so you'd have to speak to someone who actually did that. I just know a lot about building these kind of clinics, not necessarily for abortion. But I can tell you that what happens is there are different levels of clinic that can be put together. Like an example, if I had a doctor's office, there is a loophole in the law that would allow me to have a procedure room in my office. And as long as it's within a certain guideline of size, I really don't need to do anything more than just notify the state. It's still under the oversight of the state and federal enforcement for things like making sure all my tests are done right, making sure I keep my records fine, making sure that my surgery instruments are clean, all that stuff, because it's only one particular room. Now, in a clinic like an abortion clinic that only has like one room or maybe a second room, they're probably going to fall under that same guideline. Now, the reason why that's one question. The good question that you asked second is, why don't people who get abortions in abortion clinics have required follow-up? And the reason is that's not part of the business model. The business model is to get them in, get them out. Remember, the idea is to make abortions by our colleagues on the other end of the aisle, what? Is it safe, legal, and rare? So part of the safety issue is to make it easy. So if you can make it easy, then you go along that way. I mean, Nancy's story, which just broke my heart. Those are typically not, well, some of Planned Parenthoods I think do them. Most of them are done within hospital settings just because there are risks that they take on that are beyond that. But again, beyond the actual post-surgical care you get, there really isn't any other fault. You're told basically just call me if you need something. And that's not that unusual, by the way. I mean, think about anything else you would do. I mean, if you went to a doc in the box for help, you went to the local satellite emergency room for care. There's no mechanism there to follow up in that clinic either, and so they're in that kind of business. So if they even tell you, my guess is that if you have a problem, call this person, call this doctor, or call your doctor, or call after hours this person for things within that certain thing, and you're probably going to get a nurse or some sort of trained specialist who basically has something in front of them to answer basic questions. Again, it's the people who do this or who support this. I mean, think about this. The people who are on the pro-choice side should be pushing for these things. Don't you think? If they really wanted to make it safe, won't you think they'd be pushing to make sure everyone had everything, all their ducks in a row? Don't you think they'd do along that? But what's happened is these things work at the most base level, which is why when people go into different clinics, depending on what goes on, they walk out pulling their licenses, pulling their abilities, and closing them down, like happened up in Rockford.
Well, what about the Hippocratic Oath of doing no harm? I mean, isn't there people such as yourself, the people that are the new doctors coming out now, the young doctors, like
right.
this young nurse that David showed us. Is there any mentoring programs for people, pro-life doctors, to somehow draw these young doctors out who are pro-life?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are very few of us out there. I mean, there are very few of us. And the saddest part of it all, and that's just another answer to your Creighton question, we don't talk to each other. There's no real mechanism for us to find each other and talk to each other. I found one in Chicago truly as a result of a penance. I was given it in a confessional, find this guy. I found them, we've become good friends. I've talked to him 15 times in the last 2 days because we're trying to do something in Chicago. But the thing is that he's the only other really obstetrician here. I was on the radio a couple months ago in Ohio with another person who I didn't even know he existed. He doesn't write contraception for abortion, do sterilizations, but he's within a group of 3 others who do all those things, and so that buries them underneath the whole line of it. Even one of the most recent graduates of this Creighton program, a fully pro-life, wonderful woman, is in Peoria right now with 3 other doctors, one of whom is a practicing Catholic, all of whom, well, they write contraception, do sterilizations, do the whole thing. And the trend is going the other way. I just talked to another specialist by the name of John Brochalski, who was in New Jersey last weekend, and he just finished the state going for 40 medical schools in this country, being that person, talking out about abortion and things like that. OBGYN residencies are now forced to teach their residents how to do abortions, because that was one of the great pro-life messages that was under the table. In my generation, none of us were really trained to do abortions to start with. So we weren't really going to do them because, frankly, we didn't know how. And even if we wanted to do them, we couldn't do them because we didn't know how. And when I was at the U of C, with an office right next to the president of the Goodmarker Institute, we had a whole division. And they have a whole division that runs a place called the Ryan Center where they do abortions up to 23 weeks, right in their OR. But that's designed to train the next generations in OBGYNs and take all the scary stuff away from them and say, see, it's just like any other procedure. You can do this. And we just don't have those pro-life doctors because they don't. But even the ones there's an American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians out there, the only reason why you get in there is not to do abortions. Okay? Remember what I just told you? Most of us don't know how to start with, so it's easy to become a member of that. But they still practice completely against everything else we would believe in terms of all these things, which is why things like the Obamacare stuff get through, because there's nobody up there to stand up, because all of us stand up in an empty room with people all around us who are saying an alternative thing.
There would be a welcome presence at the March for Life this year, if you could get a group of them to be vocal.
It would be. It'd be even better if we could open up something in Chicago that would really address this straightforward.
What about the Catholic Medical Association? Do they do anything?
Catholic Medical Association. Catholic Medical Association, wonderful, wonderful organization. The average age of my colleagues in the Chicago chapter is like 75.
Oh, my God.
Young men don't join it because they don't really know it exists. They go to a meeting, they see that they're alone, they don't come back again. I mean, they want to get these things done, but they know they're fighting an uphill battle. I mean, I did a lot of things last year with a couple of people that were really even trying to just get a whole new way of certifying doctors. And if what I hope gets off the ground in the next few months does, one of the things we will do in the future is open up residencies and fellowships designed for pro-life physicians to come to. I think it's Francis Steubenville is opening up a medical school. I think it's them. And I believe they're going to try to put together pro-life physicians. I'm sorry to say Catholic. I'm in a Catholic room, so but Catholic physicians. It took me so long to get to my conversion because I just didn't have anybody, and even today, I don't have anybody telling me that what I'm saying, except for the nice people around here, saying that what I'm doing isn't crazy. And then get back to the other part, the first part of that question. You will never really underestimate the power of the political sphere. Do we all know about Tanya Means in this room? Does anyone not know who Tanya Means is? Tanya Means was a 28-year-old woman who went for a first trimester abortion at Planned Parenthood of Chicago. She stayed at Planned Parenthood after her abortion for 5 hours while she kind of slowly but surely passed out. No one wanted to call 911. After 5 hours, they called 911. They took her to Northwestern. They sent no records with her to Northwestern. Northwestern knew nothing about this woman. She died on the table during her hysterectomy. They just released the autopsy reports. During the abortion, they had perforated her uterus in such a fashion that they actually hit one of the major blood vessels that supplies the uterus. Now, in pregnancy, it's a wonderful thing. Think about this. Think about 500 cc's. That's like a, you know, that gallon of what's left of iced tea there, coursing through the uterus every second. Okay? And I put something through it and connect it. I don't recognize it. There are definite things that happen when that happens, okay? It's very hard to kill a young woman. They definitively showed, and people say that that it was, I don't believe that it was a cover-up. I think that really, you know, pathologists don't release things to the public. It takes a while to get, it's just the way it is. HIPAA prevents things, right? So now that it's gotten out, do you think that anyone's in there inspecting that Planned Parenthood in Chicago? Do you think there's any chance that there'll be any kind of cases brought before then? Do you think there's any likelihood that Planned Parenthood didn't write a major check to this woman's family to shut them up and keep them quiet so that this story never gets out? And how many other Tanya Means are out there? Because they just are able to get away with everything. If that happened in my clinic, I would not ever talk to you again because I'd be in jail. Okay? But this woman who's done it has been sued several times. She has a record. You can just go on the Illinois, you know, professional regulation and find it yourself. But nothing ever happens to her. And so what winds up happening is Northwestern gets held in the bag because they happen to take this person in that they didn't know what was going on. And Planned Parenthood just keeps on doing what it's doing, completely under the radar, completely doing whatever it's doing, and goes from there. It's just, and because there's not the political will to go after them.
And I just wanted to add to that, there's also, I'm sorry.
Are those physicians sanctioned? That they work at Planned Parenthood?
No.
What, how are they exempt from sanctioning?
Are they what?
How are they exempt from sanctioning when obviously there's negligent care there?
I mean, it's what we find is it's a very political issue, so a lot of them don't want to address it because they think it's so political. So this abortion clinic that performed the abortion that the doctor was referring to actually did not report to the state that they were performing abortions at that time or at that far along. So when it was performed, they had no idea that where they were coming from. They had no idea they had the facilities to do it. So that's why organizations now are calling for an inspection, because it was never actually notified to the state that they were performing abortions that far along. They didn't even know they had the ability to do so.
Is it true that abortions occur disproportionately in the African American community? I've heard that. I've heard 3 times as many. I mean, anybody can address that.
I mean, I don't have exact statistics with me, but yes, they target the poor and minorities, and it's the founder of the organization was.
You talk about Planned Parenthood?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So not just Planned Parenthood, but any abortion clinic. They know that they're the most vulnerable women out there are poor, and so they play on the poverty thing and say, you can't afford a baby, so we'll be here to take care of the issue. But ultimately, it's eugenics, and Margaret Sanger, who's the founder of Planned Parenthood, was vert eugenicist, and she wanted minorities exterminated, and Hitler even looked up to her for that reason alone. So, yeah, I don't know what the exact statistics, but if you look at the Planned Parenthood here, the closest one to us, it was built very close to the Cabrini Green projects. I don't know how their business is now because Cabrini Green is left, but when I'm out there, you know, minorities are 80% of those who come in for abortions there. So, I mean, the red line, you know, you can come from all different directions now to get there easily. So you no longer have to be geographically, especially in a city like this, you don't have to be necessarily geographically located right at a project anymore because the red line goes right there.
I usually will say that, you know, Planned Parenthoods and abortion clinics are placed in places where they're most vulnerable and poor areas, and in vitro fertilization clinics are placed in areas where the rich are. So they are. You won't find one deep in the south side. Even the UFC site in the south side is in River North. So you got people going along those lines, and I would echo what he said. That's really designed to disproportionately target the poor. And the IVF clinics, the same eugenics type of idea, are targeting the rich. Because between pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, in vitro fertilization, designer babies, all this kind of stuff, we're getting to that same line, but under an area that is underneath the radar because we don't think of it as a problem. Because at the end of it is you get the opposite effect. At the end of it, you get a baby. And as long as you keep on thinking about it as a baby, you always, it's the great shadow. As long as you can focus on the baby, you forget where the baby came from and how the baby got to you. And just as people mourn their lost children, people should mourn their frozen embryos.
I have something to say about can you guys hear me? About the frozen embryos. I was giving this talk one time, and a woman came up to me afterward, and she said, could you come to my home afterward, tomorrow, and talk to me? And I said, sure. And I thought she probably had an abortion. So I went there, and the grief and the loss and everything looked just classically like someone who had an abortion. She sat there and told me about grieving over her frozen embryos that she and her husband had buried that weekend. And she felt really alone because no one was talking about that, and she wondered what was wrong with her. And it was just exactly like someone who had aborted a child. So they're suffering too, and perhaps not even recognizing it.
Any more questions? Well, let's call it a night, and thank you so much for coming. And I appreciate all the time that you've given us and the help and advice. Good night.